Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Health and Safety at Work webinar, all to do with safeguarding. So before we start, we just want to introduce ourselves. So our main presenter today is Dom Greenwood, our Senior Health and Safety Manager. I'll be supporting Dom in the background. I'm the HR Knowledge Manager, and we also have a team Arden, the Digital Marketing Executive, who will be able to help us if there should be any technical issues. Do let us know if you have any questions as we go through the webinar. And for those of you that have been on our webinars before, you'll be able to ask questions. For obvious reasons, because we've got so many people here today, then everybody's on mute. So when it comes to wanting to raise a question, then we'll be taking them at the end, but please do note your comments in the comments box as we go through the webinar. Here's a quick guide to show you how you do that. You can ask the questions via the GoToWebinar panel that should look something like this. So please type your question in the question pane, and then we'll aim to read out and answer as many as we can at the end of the webinar. If we run out of time, then of course we will still respond to those questions directly afterwards. And as usual, we want to make this session as interactive as we would normally at our live event. So we will be running a series of polls throughout the session as well. When we have a poll, it will appear on your screen and you just select the answer that is appropriate for you. Please note, to be able to participate in the polls, then you will need to ensure your screen is not in full screen mode, because for some reason with GoToWebinar, it doesn't seem to like the full screen mode. So with that, I'm now going to hand the presentation over to Dom, who will then start to take you through our webinar on safeguarding. Over to you, Dom.
Thanks, Victoria. Hi, everybody. My name is Dom Greenwood, and as Victoria's already said, I'm the Senior Health and Safety and Environmental Management Consultant for HR Solutions. And today we're going to be talking about safeguarding and safeguarding in the workplace. If you can just confirm, Victoria, you can see that moving, then I'll carry on.
Yep, so we now have the hands up screen. So we need to look at the agenda. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you. So I'll just quickly take you through the agenda we're going to talk about over the next, however long it might be, 30, 40 minutes. Sort of an introduction really to what safeguarding is. And I think unfortunately safeguarding often gets forgotten about when we talk about health and safety in the workplace. And I think it also gets more commonly talked about maybe in the care setting or maybe in hospitals or in the community, but obviously the employers do have a duty of care over all the workforce to make sure that safeguarding is being looked at and all the workforce are being looked after in the workplace. I'm going to share with you some safeguarding statistics, and they're taken from a variety of different bodies and authorities across the piece really. We're going to shortly look at legislation and what legislation there is available in the UK and what legislation employers and owners and managers should be thinking about. What the indicators of abuse and neglect could be, and this is not definitive, there's a number of other ones, and you'll appreciate this is a very short session. I do teach a whole day on this and a 2 and 3 day version of the course as well. So this is really just a snapshot of kind of indicators of abuse and neglect. And then something called the 5 R's, which is a model that staff and managers can use in the workplace when kind of looking at safeguarding policies, and should there be an allegation or an incident, what you could and should do. And then moving on from that, what would the essential tools for the workplace be? There's a number of different tools that managers, owners should think about putting in place for the workplace to not only safeguard their staff and maybe visitors, but also what would happen if there was an incident or an allegation. Would you know what to do? Have you got the forms, the documentation, the policies and procedures there so that staff can access those to understand what to do? And again, I think it's because we are so developed now with regards to health and safety and fire safety, that they're the 2 big ones in the workplace. That I think sometimes things like safeguarding does get left behind, and also because there's nowhere near as many, which is a good thing, safeguarding incidents and allegations, that quite a number of companies don't have any kind of safeguarding policies and procedures. And then looking at signposting, where you can go to get advice or information, one, to inform staff from more of a training perspective, but also what to do should there be an incident and allegation, and also where you can get information from to inform. And then maybe some further training that you could think about for your staff in the workplace. And then how can we help? What can we help you with regards to setting up different systems or schemes? So there's quite a few bits to get through over the next sort of 30 minutes. So what is safeguarding? Well, there are a number of definitions. Safeguarding is a term used to denote measures to promote and protect the health, well-being and human rights of any individual. And again, I think we often think of it as vulnerable children and adults, which it absolutely is. However, obviously in the workplace, it would be any worker, any colleague, anybody accessing the workplace. Protecting the human rights of individuals, which allow people, especially children and young people, to live free from abuse, harm and neglect. And that could be in a community, it could be in a care setting, but it also could be in the workplace, in an office, in a factory, whatever it might be. I think one point I'd like to make is safeguarding is everyone's responsibility, very much like health and safety and fire and other topics. It's everybody's responsibility. It's about people and organisations working together. And I'm going to talk to you about something called the MASH group, or the MASH hub, which is something that came into force after a number of very high profile safeguarding incidents took place in the sort of early 2000s, where prior to that organisations and authorities were working very much on their own, and under new safeguarding regulations, authorities and organisations need to work together and share information, and by doing that, that prevents and reduces risks and experiences of abuse and neglect. And if we go back to the workplace, in the workplace there is a legal duty to identify those at risk and taking the appropriate action. So you may have staff that you think could be vulnerable, and there's a number of reasons they could be vulnerable. It could be because they maybe have an illness, but it also could be because they've been part of something in their personal and domestic life. It could be that you're made aware of something. It could be a conversation you may need to have. But it also could be just because of maybe their age, or maybe the job they're doing. So there's a number of reasons why somebody could be vulnerable. All employees have an entitlement to be safeguarded from a mental, physical, health and safety perspective. We all know that, but also from a safeguarding perspective. And safeguarding comes in a number of forms, and the abuse, neglect and experience they could suffer comes in a number of forms as well. So there's other definitions out there you'll appreciate. These are just ones I've used in previous training sessions, and ones that organisations like the Health and Safety Executive and the NSPCC often use as well. So there's just a few definitions and terms there to start things off. Going to move on to some statistics. And again, there's loads of statistics out there, but on this particular one, and this is taken from Safeguarding Adults England report. 475,500 concerns of abuse were raised during 2019 and 2020, which was an increase of nearly 15% on the prior year. So there's nearly 500,000 concerns on an annual basis that with regards to safeguarding adults. And I think as well, we often think of safeguarding as children. Obviously, schools and nurseries and playgroups and play centres are very much on safeguarding. And probably not as much with regards to in the workplace, unless obviously you work in maybe a hospital, an old people's home, or a centre, for instance. But interestingly, as I said, 500,000 concerns were raised in that year. The number of Section 42 inquiries that commenced during the year increased by nearly 13% to 161, nearly 162,000, and involved nearly 130,000 people. And again, that's taken from the same survey. A Section 42 inquiry is basically an action that's instigated by either the local authority or police under Section 42 of the Care Act, and that's where the terminology comes from. And basically, it's a response to an indication of abuse or neglect, which then gives the local authority or the police responsibility to take immediate action. So it's where there's a particularly vulnerable person or a particularly serious case. So Section 42s are particularly serious. So you'll appreciate, again, there's been a rise there. And the reason I've put those two stats on the screen is that, unfortunately, we're seeing increases year on year, 15% on the first point, and 13% 15% on the second point. So we are seeing increases in safeguarding, and that could be due to the fact that there's more reporting than there was. If we look back at figures that are around year 2000, 2005, 2010, there wasn't as much reporting as there is now. The health and safety executive reports on things, NHS reports on things, various children's authorities do as well, as does the Safeguarding Adults report. But again, disappointingly, things are unfortunately escalating year on year. Interesting start, and again, this is from the Bullying in the Workplace Statistics report. 23% of workers have been bullied at work, and again, we would consider bullying at work a safeguarding issue, because that can lead to physical, verbal, or mental abuse, and can lead to obviously different conditions, illnesses, and just generally the person feeling pretty rubbish in the workplace, and that can then lead to them having time off, days off work, and their performance dipping, and that could then lead to potentially an HR issue. But yeah, nearly a quarter of workers that were surveyed feel that they've been bullied at work, which again is quite a worrying start. And again, moving on from that, 739,000 incidents of violence at work. And again, that is split across varying different sectors. And if you want to look at the report, you'll see the different sectors there, from local authorities to working in factories to construction, whatever it might be. But I know that there's a number of different industries and sectors represented on the call today, and we've got a number of people on the call today. But again, 739,000 people have been involved in an incident of violence at work, which again is a massive number. And then the crime survey for England and Wales, and again, it's worth a little look at that one. It's quite up to date. It's from last year. Estimated that on 1 in 5 adults aged experience at least one form of child abuse, whether emotional, physical, sexual, or witnessing domestic violence or abuse before the age of 16. So again, it's something that's unfortunately ingrained in children from an early age, and they often then go on to lead have difficulty in the following years, which represents 8.5 million people. And again, another children one there is that 50,000 children in England were identified as needing protection from abuse in 2019, which again is from the Department of Education. So there's hundreds of stats out there. These are just a few I picked out to inform on today. A number that pertain to adults, a number that pertain to the workplace, and obviously a couple there for children. But I think the overall and overarching message is that safeguarding is a real thing. It's going on. Whether we like to think about it or whether we don't, unfortunately, even in the workplace, there are issues taking place. And it's great you guys are on the call today. And if we can be of further help with regards to either training, signposting, or helping you with documents, then let's have that conversation, because it'd be great if we can see some of these stats go down over forthcoming years. So we're going to start with our first poll, and I'm going to reveal the question, then hand back to Victoria. And the first question really is: do you feel that safeguarding is taken seriously in your workplace? So I'll hand back to Victoria.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dom. So I'm going to launch the poll, and you'll shortly be able to vote in the poll. Leave it a little bit longer. Wait for a few more to come in, and then I'll close the poll. Okay, so I'm going to close that poll now. And I'm going to share the results. There you go, Dom. We have the results. So do you feel that safeguarding is taken seriously in your workplace? 85% say yes, and 15% say no.
It's a great response that 85% of people do feel it's taken seriously. So that's really pleasing. And again, for the people that are saying no, I'm not sure whether that's a management issue, that it's not really taken seriously because it's not understood. But again, I'd be more than happy to talk to anybody that would like either some advice or some help with, whether it be training or creating kind of documents or whatever that might be. But 85% is a really good stat, so that's great to hear. If we move on to legislation, over the years, there's a number of pieces of legislation, and this is where safeguarding differs from things like the Health and Safety at Work Act and obviously the Fire Safety Order, is that safeguarding is embedded in a number of different pieces of legislation, and it's because it's such a wide-ranging subject. There's a number of guidance documents that are around as well for the protection of children, young people, and adults. And interestingly, all of our devolved governments have their own framework, and this is something that we teach on the course, is that depending on where you live, obviously England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, there's a slightly different procedure and process with regards to reporting safeguarding issues formally. They are very, very similar, but they've all got their own framework that set out duties and responsibilities for the organisations. But the very best place to get all the information from would be the gov.uk website, because all the acts and regulations are on there. And again, in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, they've got their own as well. So please go to that for any updates. The main piece of legislation you'll see is obviously the Children Act, originally concepted in '89 but was reviewed in 2004. That's still the primary piece of legislation for the welfare of children in the UK. And obviously anybody that's got children in schools, care homes, hospitals, whatever that might be, it would come under the Children Act, with the Care Act again being the primary piece of legislation where for older people. But obviously again, you'll find that with regards to the Mental Capacity Act, there's safeguarding mentioned in there, Vulnerable Groups Act, and obviously in the Health and Safety at Work Act as well. So there's a number of different parts of these legislations that pertain to safeguarding, with no one real kind of safeguarding act or piece of legislation. So the reason I'm mentioning this is that it's not as easy to look at your responsibilities as it is in the Health and Safety at Work Act, where it's quite specific that you need to, if you employ more than 5 people, you need to, whereas it's slightly different here. So, and again, should anybody want any help or advice on how to kind of bring this into life in your workplace, please do reach out, because we're more than happy to help. There is a load more, and you'll see on your screen there as a table with other relevant legislation. And again, there's the Care Standards Act, there's the Education Act. You'll appreciate safeguarding would appear in there. We all know about the Equality Act, Health and Social Care Act, Human Rights, Mental Health Act, and a number of others, where safeguarding issues and relevance is mentioned in a variety of different places. So again, I think it's going to be very difficult to draw down all of these pieces of legislation and know them back to front, but just be aware there are other, depending on your industry and depending on what sector you're from, it would depend on which legislation, which act you would probably need to consult with. So what is significant harm? Significant harm can be any form of abuse, neglect, accident or injury that seriously and sufficiently promotes suffering to an individual or someone's life. And that can be from mental, physical abuse. It can be from physical, maybe torture. It can also be about not giving somebody their medication if they need it. That's significant harm, because they'll then come to harm because they need medication to be able to function potentially. Abuse would then be the violation of someone's civil or human rights by another person or persons. I think it's interesting to talk about persons. It's not always one-on-one, it could be a group. And certainly if we go back to the workplace, it can be a number of people that could be unfortunately doing this to an individual. Abuse can vary from treating somebody with disrespect in a way which significantly affects the person's enjoyment of life to actual physical suffering. And we've all heard of the term abuse before. With neglect being the persistent failure to meet someone's basic physical or psychological needs. And again, this could be warmth, shelter, medication, food, and it could also be self-neglect. I think it's interesting to think about neglect. Not only could be a parent to a child, it could be a carer to a patient, but it could be the person themselves. And it could be that you see somebody coming into work that doesn't look the same as they usually would, wearing the same clothes for all week, They look rather dishevelled and withdrawn, and it could be that that's the point, that the supportive conversation will be opened to talk about, you know, is everything okay? That could be quite difficult for some people, and this is where I think it's really, really important for organisations and companies, workplaces, to think about who would the safeguarding lead stroke person be. A little bit like the mental health first aider that we talked about a month ago. It really needs to be a person that would be good at listening, be happy to talk to somebody about maybe difficult circumstances, be very organised and take notes, remain confidential, supportive, and I'm sure you could think of people in your organisations that could be. So it could be that you've been made aware of a situation that's going on domestically in someone's house that they may have spoken to a different worker about, that you might have to talk about. It could be that something's happening in the workplace, and your safeguarding champion stroke lead would have sort of eyes and ears on the ground to see what is going on on the ground. So we've got significant harm, we've got abuse and neglect. They're all very interlinked, but they are also separate topics as well. Just moving on to different characteristics and forms of abuse, and again, these last two slides form part of a much wider training program. The level 3 safeguarding course is a 6-hour course, and these slides are taken from that training. I don't think any of us want to accept that this actually goes on, and certainly on the training course we talk about a number of different high-profile cases that have affected children and vulnerable adults over the years, and in a positive way, a lot of these cases have shaped our new legislation. And I think I mentioned to you earlier about the MASH hubs that were born some 15-20 years ago due to a young lady called Victoria Climbié, who was unfortunately murdered at the hands of her great aunt in one of the London boroughs. And if you've not heard of her, it'd be worth looking at her, Victoria Climbié, and her story, because what happened to her didn't need to have happened, and it was a failing of the authorities and regulators that they didn't talk to each other. But since that day, the new legislation is now that multi-agency safeguarding hubs have been created. So it's very difficult to accept child and adult abuse happens, but it does happen. It's also common in most countries and cultures. Any adult or child, regardless of their age, gender, race, religion, culture, or social background, may be at risk of physical, sexual, psychological harm, or potential victim of abuse. There's no kind of rhyme or reason. However, we do find that in less affluent areas there are more safeguarding areas. However, safeguarding issues happen in all communities everywhere across the UK. Again, so another reference would be, if anybody's got access to say Netflix, a really good docudrama is one called Three Girls, which if you like kind of crime dramas, Three Girls is set over 60-minute episodes, and it shows you what happens to three girls in the community. So Victoria Climbié is one to have a look at, and Three Girls is another one to have a look at. There is, however, evidence to suggest that incidents of abuse can be reduced and often prevented through implementation of national strategies, and I'd go above and beyond that by saying your policies, procedures, training, information and awareness back in the workplace. And there's a number of different abuse categories. I'm going to flash them all up only because you might be surprised about how many there are. I think we're all aware of physical abuse, psychological abuse, obviously got sexual abuse on there as well, discriminatory abuse as well, you know, depending on where, you know, what someone does, they may look slightly different, they may talk slightly differently. That's a characteristic of abuse. Domestic abuse, obviously what happens at home. Financial abuse, somebody could be being abused financially by having money taken, or unfortunately somebody may have been befriended because they've got money, or they're a vulnerable person and being asked to sign money over. Modern slavery is now the biggest industry in the world with regards to people being brought over from foreign countries or from this country to do various different jobs. You know, human trafficking, that type of thing. And again, it might be that in the workplace you may have seen something like that going on. And again, you know, what are you going to do? Organisational abuse would be about people that are maybe in prison, in a hospice, in a hospital, or somewhere where they have to stay in and be there kind of 24 hours a day. Neglect from others, we talked about earlier, and self-neglect as well. And then bullying and victimization. And again, this is one that definitely happens in the workplace. I draw you back to the stat we talked about on one of the earlier slides, with potentially a quarter of the workforce that were interviewed thinking they were or had been involved with bullying and victimization in the workplace. So these are really big topics, and there's a number of different forms of abuse that fall into these categories. So just going to move on to a little model it's a handy way of remembering your roles and responsibilities really with regards to a safeguarding issue. And I don't think any of us really want to get involved with a safeguarding issue, but we equally can't close our eyes and walk away and go home and think it'll be okay, because it may not be. So there's just a quick model there that can help with recognise being the first R, respond, report, record, and refer. So it's a well documented model called the 5 R's of safeguarding: recognise, respond, report, record, refer. And you know, if you don't take anything else away from this session today, it'd be nice to think that you could look into the 5 R's and potentially put something on maybe a notice board, a newsletter, and just say, you know, we're looking at the 5 R's of safeguarding, and this is what they are. I'm going to briefly just run through them now. So recognise. Knowing the signs and indicators of abuse and neglect will help you to recognise when something isn't quite right. Always trust your instincts, whether you notice suspicious bruising on a colleague or worry that a colleague has missed a few days of work in a row without any particular reason. It's your duty to recognise these instances as potential indicators of a safeguarding concern. And what I don't want everybody to do is to think, so-and-so was off for a couple of days last week, there must be a safeguarding issue there. They're obviously having problems at home and there's domestic abuse going on. That's just what we don't want to happen. It's about watching. It's about looking at how people interact. It's about looking at somebody that's normally quite vibrant and very chatty and gets involved with everything, to then they're not being involved. They're not responding. They're having time off work. There's a number of different reasons. So it's about recognizing those signs and indicators that something could have happened. And again, it could be if you're working with children, you know, it may be a care home or a nursery or something like that. It's how do they behave together, how are they interacting together, what are they saying, are they using language they wouldn't normally use, is there marks and bruising. And it's just about, in this first stage, watching, maybe writing things down, dates, times, descriptions, and then if it goes away, great. If everything goes back to normal, we don't have to action anything, but we just might need to, and that's where we can move it on. Respond. Once you've established a reason for concern, it's your professional duty to respond in an appropriate manner. Your safeguarding policy will detail the steps you should take to respond safely and effectively to any safeguarding issue. So have you got a safeguarding policy? And if you haven't, need to think about putting one in place. There's a number available. We can help you with that as well. Always be sure to do this as soon as possible, preferably straight away, and under no circumstances should you ever ignore a safeguarding concern. It may not go away, it may go away. Don't think it's somebody else's responsibility. If you've seen something, if you've got a safeguarding lead, and a number of companies do have a very defined structure for safeguarding personnel and great policies, then refer back to it and go and talk to them. I've seen this, I've heard this, this is continually happening, this person saying this is what's going on. Always go back to the policy, because it should, if you've got a good policy, tell you step by step what you need to do in that situation. Report. Your first point of contact when it comes to reporting a safeguarding concern should be your safeguarding lead or line manager. So again, it should be well documented in your organisation that the health and safety competent person is, the fire marshals are, the first aid staff are, the mental health first aider is, and our safeguarding lead is. And again, there's various different job titles for this kind of role. It could be a safeguarding lead, it could be a safeguarding officer, could be a wellbeing officer. I've heard this role be badged up in various different guises, but it's safeguarding lead. It's the person that's going to know what to do should there be an incident or allegation. If they're not available, talk to your line manager and just say, I've heard this, I've seen that, I've been made aware of that. If you're unsure of who this person is, seek advice in a way that does not involve giving away the details of the situation at hand. Remember, all safeguarding matters should remain confidential and must only be shared with the people you're involved in the safeguarding process. You can always make an anonymous call to your MASH hub, and I'm going to talk to you about what that is later, and we already mentioned it, but you don't have to give your details. It can be anonymous, so don't feel that you can't talk to anybody. So the 5 R's so far: we've got recognise, respond and report. Record, probably the most important one. It's incredibly important to make a record of everything you've seen and heard when it comes to a safeguarding incident, and that can be in a notepad, it could be on a Word document that you're saving, whatever it might be. But do it as soon as possible. You'll be surprised what you forget. It's a little bit like doing the first aid form or the accident report form 2 weeks after the person's had the accident, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, was it the left hand or the right hand? Oh, I can't really remember. Do it at the time when it's fresh in your mind and you can get all the details down. Write down exactly what happened, including dates, times, names and details of any individuals involved, and record as much information to ensure the most accurate account of the incident. And again, if the person is talking to you confidentially, read the report back to you. As part of your safeguarding process, you need to think about putting in place a witness notes form and probably a statement form, which again we can help you with. But the safeguarding policy will have a number of different documents that will drop out of it as well to help you report and record an incident. And refer would be the 5th R. There's a genuine concern for an individual's safety, or if you think somebody might be a victim of abuse, neglect or maltreatment, you must refer your concerns to the correct authority. This will usually happen via your practice manager in this case, or safeguarding leads, who will escalate the concern to the local authority contact in the MASH team. And we've already said that's the multi-agency support hub. And what that is, it's a group that's made up of the police, social services, education, hospital, all of the different groups will have a representative on that team who will share information depending on which industry or sector you work for. And there could be other partners as well. Now, these could be located in your local police headquarters, in your local hospital, in your local doctor's practice, or in your local council or social services building. I've known them in a man of different places. Go and find out where yours is, because it'll be easy to find. You can Google it. MASH team, Cambridgeshire, Northamptonshire, whatever it might be, but go and find out where they are, because you just might need to access that person. Find out who your local MASH hub coordinator is, and in the same way as your local health and safety inspector, your local community support policeman, it'd be worth having all their details down, so that should you not be there, somebody else could access those different people should there be an incident. So we've got our 5 R's of safeguarding. Please use these. Please take them back to your teams, because they're really, really important. And if you don't do anything else from today, it'd just be great for you to have an understanding of the 5 R's. So we move on to our essential tools to the workplace, and I've already spoken about it already. The safeguarding policy is the most important document that there would be. It's going to be quite copious. There's a lot to it. But in there, it should tell you or any other member of staff what to do should there be an incident, an allegation, or somebody's witnessed a form of bullying, victimization, violence, neglect, abuse, or whatever else it might be. Is there a process that then drops out of the policy, and it could be in a table form, a flowchart form, that everybody knows what they're doing, and should there be an incident or allegation, you can follow the process to the letter, and there should then be a successful outcome. Have you got a risk assessment for vulnerable adults, children, workers, or anybody else that access your building on a regular basis? And it could be a teacher, it could be somebody that's in a support role, it could be a manager, and there could be a number of different reasons why this person's been identified. It could also be the people you've got coming in. It could be if you're in the leisure sector, you're having groups of people coming in to access fitness equipment, swimming pools, outdoor sports pitches. It could also be you're in a factory or working for a charity where you have people coming in. So the safeguarding risk assessment is really, really important. Already mentioned it, but have you got an incident report form, much the same as an accident report form, that should there be a safeguarding incident, you've got the document there. Get them printed out, ready to go. Hopefully you'll never need to use them, but what you don't want to be doing is, well, I think it's here somewhere, I'll just get it printed out ready. Oh, I can't find it. If it's in the folder with all the safeguarding information, you just pull it off the shelf and you can start straight away. In the same way, the witness statement form, again, much the same as an instant near miss or accident, you've got the safeguarding witness statement form ready to go, and you can almost conduct that interview straight away. Investigation form, much the same. And again, stuff like DBS, I'm not sure if you're doing DBS, you may remember them as CRB forms, but have you got a DBS process? I would imagine if you're in the education sector, the care sector, you'll be doing that. But if you're not in that sector, you can still do DBS as well, and we can help you with that. We've partnered with a company, with an organisation that does loads of checks as well, so we can do checks on your behalf. So please talk to us if you need DBS checks doing. Are your staff aware of what safeguarding is? I think we've already talked about staff are much more up to date with health and safety and fire, but I'm finding things like mental health and safeguarding are the two that are not as much, but these can have just as much devastating effects on people as health and safety and fire as well. So is there any staff training that you can put in place? Is there an awareness session? Is there a video that you can get them to watch? We've got an online e-learning training platform. It's really, really cost effective, and there's a number of videos and short quizzes that go back to safeguarding, and they're really, really good. And on the back of that as well, training. Have you got a safeguarding lead that is trained to a national accredited standard? And if not, it's really worth thinking about doing that so that they're up to skills and up to date with safeguarding information in the same way that they are health and safety and fire. And then appointing this lead person, this safeguarding lead officer, and it could be the office manager, it could be the practice manager, the care manager, the leisure manager. It could be the person that you think could tie this together and really make it robust. That should there be an issue, you've got all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. And then is there some sort of central information point in the facility, in the workplace, where not only health and safety information can be put on there, but safeguarding information, maybe news articles, different links to different organisations that people can look at or access, the policies and procedures. It's not in the office; it's in a central point where everybody's got access to go. It could be in a staff area, a wellness area, in a circulatory corridor, in the factory, whatever it is, and you're all from different sectors. But think about that centralised information area that people can go to access the information. And do you portray a positive culture? Have you got a zero tolerance policy on bullying and victimization, or do you turn a blind eye to little things that you've seen or heard going on? I think it'd be great for you to say to everybody in the workplace, we take a zero tolerance on adverse safeguarding and things like that. So this is what we're going to be doing, and we're really going to upskill everybody and make everybody more aware. So creating that positive culture is really, really important. So I'm going to hand back to Victoria just for our last poll, and the question this time would be, do you feel that you've got the tools at work to effectively manage safeguarding? I'm back to Victoria.
Thank you, Dom. Brilliant, thank you. So I'm going to launch the poll, and you should see that on your screen now. Remember, you need to be out of full screen mode if you want to participate in the poll. Okay, we've still got them coming through. Okay, I'm going to close the poll and share the results. So, Dom, in answer to the question, do you feel that you have the tools at work to effectively manage safeguarding? 66% say yes, and 34% say no.
Thanks so much. And obviously that's a bit of a drop from the first poll, that everybody felt that, or a big proportion felt that you've got the culture in the workplace, but that's a drop of 20% with regards to the tools that are available. So I think there's some work to be done there. And again, we're more than happy to help. Please do reach out to us. We've got a variety of documents we can help you with, or we can come and run some sessions. But yeah, do think about bringing those into the workplace, because it is really important. So just a quick bit on signposting. I've talked already about the multi-agency support safeguarding hub, MASH, not to be confused with the 1970s Vietnam War comedy. But please do go away and find out where yours is, because as I said earlier, they could be in a variety of different places. It could be that they're at the council offices, the social services department, police, or the health centre, or even in the hospital. I've even known them to be in doctor's surgeries before. So just find out where yours is. But that would be a really good resource and reference point should you have an issue, to go straight to your MASH hub. Obviously, if the issue is serious enough, the police 999 are going to be the place to go. If you feel that there's such an indication of abuse, neglect, or anything else, you know, the police are going to be the people to talk to. Citizens advice are also really good, and you can phone them anonymously to find out maybe and get some advice on what you should do next. But your homework today is to find out where your MASH department is located. And if we think about training, you know, have you thought of training your staff to understand safeguarding, looking for the signs of abuse and neglect, embedding the safeguarding policy, and then knowing what to do if there were an incident or allegation? And that can be formal accredited national training. It can be more of a workshop base. You know, and I can come and help deliver an awareness session in the workplace, or it could be more of a level 3 Ofqual regulated course for safeguarding vulnerable children and adults, which I can train up to 12 people at once. And we cover a variety of different indicators of abuse, policy, procedure, statistics, and things that have really helped shape the safeguarding legislation over the years. We can also help you develop a safeguarding policy, and then all the different forms, check sheets, and supplementary documents that would then fall out of that policy and procedure that would help you effectively manage an incident or allegation. I think policies and procedures are all well and good, and I see some absolutely amazing policies and procedures, but unfortunately no one else sees them. They sit in folders on shelves and gather dust. So, you know, bring your policies and procedures to life. Talk to the staff about them, run toolbox talks about why they're there and what to do, run scenarios, give them a one each. It's not just a paper exercise just to fulfill the legal requirement. They need to be done for a reason, and I think bringing them to life and making them really good is really important. There's a number of useful links there, which I know when the presentation comes out you can access, but I've tried to put as many on there as possible, and to try and hit as many of our different sectors as we can. The HSE is the first one, obviously, citizens advice, but you've got the CQC, and I know a number of our delegates on today are from that particular sector, so that the Care Quality Commission have got a number of different safeguarding themes and strategies. There's a government MASH working together document that you can access. A really good one is from the Anne Craft Trust that I found, and they look like they're a charity that are always putting up information on mental health, particularly mental health and safeguarding, where they've got a number of documents and principles that you can access. Obviously the government website, there's a GP's toolkit you can access, the GMC's on there as well, Age UK, and the last 5 or 6 are all to do with children, NSPCC, Childline, Save the Children. They've all got documents, procedures, policies, and strategies you can access, and just get information about what you should be doing going forward. It's been a lot of information to take in our sort of 50 minutes together. This is, as I said, this is part of a much wider training session. I just wanted to give you a flavour of, you know, where safeguarding has come from, what you can do, and the impact it can have on people in the workplace. And I'm more than happy to take some questions either now or offline. And I think I'll hand back to Victoria to host that session.
Brilliant, thank you, Dom, and that's a really informative webinar, very interesting, and very difficult subject as well, and yeah. So thank you for that. So I've been looking at the questions. We've got some that have come through that I'm just going to put to you. So let's see what we have. So at the very outset, you talked about bullying, and there were some really interesting statistics actually early on in the webinar. This question is around the bullying statistics. So they're saying not that bullying is right in any way, but how much of the statistics are unintended, unknown bullying? So I guess, I don't know, I'd probably say it's quite difficult.
It's going to be
determine
very
that.
difficult to, I think, yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I did do is what I really want to do on the webinar is to put some statistics against some of the things I was talking about, and there's a whole plethora of statistics available, you'll appreciate. And again, it's very industry specific. The answer to the questions I don't know. I think it would be worth going back to the reports to see if there's any more detail on the stats. I think the overarching point I was trying to make on those stats is that it grows year on year. And in fact, the course that I teach is now 3 years old. And if I look at the stats on the course that the awarding body gave me, they've already gone up 4, 5, 6% from kind of 2016, 17 to 18, 19 and 20. So every year it appears to be growing. And even though we're doing training, we're doing awareness, we're doing policies, procedures, and all those things we talked about, it would appear there's still a massive issue, not only in the community, but also in the workplace.
Yeah, and if you think
Not sure
about
if
the
that really
last,
answered
no,
the question.
that's really helpful, Dom. And I suspected it's probably quite hard to sort of drill down into detail. I guess we'll have a link on the slides
Yeah,
afterwards, will
I
we,
think,
to the
yeah,
reports?
we will, yeah, we will, yeah.
Okay, brilliant. We have a question. If, for example, you live in Derbyshire but work in Nottinghamshire, which MASH would you contact? Would you know?
It would be, well, it again depends whether it's a workplace or domestic issue.
Okay.
My initial response would be, if it's in the workplace, it would be the MASH group that's in and around the workplace, which I think would have been Derby, I think from memory. But obviously, if we're made aware that it's a domestic issue, it would potentially be the Nottinghamshire one. What I would say, it probably doesn't really matter because they talk to each other.
Okay.
So if you're talking to a MASH officer in Derbyshire and you say, well, the colleague lives in Nottingham, but they work in Derbyshire, they will tell you what you need to do. It's more important to talk to somebody rather than not talk to anybody, because that is the whole reason the MASH groups were set up. There were, I think, 4 or 5 massive cases. I mean, you'll all remember Baby P. And it's the most difficult session on the course I teach, to talk about Baby P and why that happened. And we've got another little lad called Daniel Pelker and Victoria Climbier that all happened around the same time. And they all happened because there were failures of our regulators and our authorities, which is the whole reason the MASH groups were set up. So just talk to one of them, and they'll then talk to each other.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know.
Which I'm hoping answers the question.
And I think this is our last question now.
Okay.
So, why do we have to get involved with incidents outside the workplace?
You don't have to. I mean, you're not legally obliged. You're not legally obliged to get involved in outside the workplace, but surely, morally and ethically, you'd probably want to offer support to that colleague if you're made aware that things are. If you know that things are happening, and the reason you'd probably want to is that could then have an impact on your workplace, because if the person is being subjected to abuse sexually, domestically, financially, or whatever it might be, there's a whole army of stuff that we can talk about that will have a massive implication on how they're performing at work, their relationships, if they're using machinery, if they're on medication. So my view would be, morally and ethically, you'd still want to become involved. Now, how involved you want to become is up to you. It could be a supportive conversation, it could be an anonymous phone call, it could just be just watching, eyes and ears on the ground. But there are massive correlations with the way somebody is in a domestic setting to then how they are in the work setting.
Absolutely, and I think from with my HR hat on, there are things that happen outside of work that actually end up impacting at work, and so there does become that obligation from a duty of care to respond in some way. So what that response looks like, obviously, it very much depends on the circumstances, but If you're suddenly seeing high absenteeism happening, then your return to work interviews, your welfare meetings that you hold, you know, there could be something going on that could be leading them to absence from work. Or, you know, you might see a drop in performance, like you said earlier on the webinar, around somebody that's normally upbeat, positive, and, you know, really engaging, suddenly then becomes withdrawn. You know, it's about trying to understand, you know, are they okay, and then using any tools that you offer as a workplace to help support, because there is a fine line, because ultimately we're not medical experts, we're not trained counsellors, so we have to also respect there is only a certain amount of support that we can offer, and that's why having those open conversations in welfare meetings, directing them to any employee assistance program that the business offers, directing them back to their GP if they need, perhaps if you think they need some medical or professional input from a medical professional, you know, and things like that. So it's really important to recognise how you can direct them to various sources. And if you offer mental health first aiders in the workplace, you know, we talk a lot about that, don't we? Maybe there's an opportunity for people to go and seek support from a mental health first aider. So so I think there is a certain amount of need and moral and ethical responsibilities for employees to, and duty of care to look after.
I think you could be, you've got to think of it as though you could be saving someone's life.
Yeah.
And that's a really powerful statement, and you know, we're going to leave people on that, but it could be that conversation with somebody that you've seen something, you've heard something, they might just say to you, well, actually it's because of this. Wanted to talk to anyone about it before because no one seemed interested, but this is what's going on.
Yeah.
And that could be the difference between that situation stopping and or you turn a blind eye and it carries on.
And I remember,
so very difficult.
It is. It's very difficult. And I remember when I've previously worked in the education sector, and going through safeguarding training for me personally in that working environment, you know, the one thing that struck me is the lesson that they said that even if you see something in isolation and it's a little bit and you think, oh, that's nonsense, actually it could just be one very, very small piece of a very big jigsaw. And actually the importance in escalating and raising it and flagging it, because actually people that you flag to may be aware of, you know, a bigger issue that may be going on. So it's really important to pick things up, but also understand actually you're not trained counsellors either, and you're not medical professionals, so there is a point at which you need to direct people to the relevant parties.
I think the reason a lot of people don't is because there's a number of different barriers to getting involved. They're not sure of the process. They don't want to be recognised as the kind of whistleblower. They don't want their relationship with the person to change. There's a number of different reasons, and we covered this on the course, there's a number of reasons why a great proportion of people don't get involved. But it's still worth getting involved, even if you get it wrong, to start that ball rolling. And it could be that it's nothing, but it could be that it is just something.
So that's really helpful. Thank you, Don, for that. And we have one more question that's actually just come in. So it's again talking about MASH. So if you were to approach MASH, would it be confidential, or would it be known? Would it be the point of contact? I think the same. Again, basically, is it confidential, or would the
it's confidential? I'm pretty sure it's confidential. I think when you have that initial conversation with the MASH team, you would say, I would like this to remain confidential because I work with this person, but I also work with the other person. So I'd rather my name not be brought into it. So you can always remain anonymous. But again, reiterate the point, it's still better to contact MASH or citizen advice or the police or whoever it might be, and start that ball rolling, and they will then almost take over from you and see how it goes.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you. That's all the questions. Thank you, everybody, for submitting the questions. And that brings today's webinar to a close. So thank you very much, Dom. So I just want to bring the webinar to a close and just go through some closing slides here. But before we get onto those, we actually have one final poll that we would like to ask, and it's around understanding if there's any further support that we may be able to help you and your organisation moving forward. And if so, can we contact you in regards to those? And we're looking to understand if you'd like to find out more about mental health or other health and safety training, health and safety services that we can offer, HR services or training, or generally any other services. So I would just like to kindly ask to seek your views. So I'm going to call up the poll, which you shall see on your screen. Dom, can you see the poll?
I can, yep.
Yeah, brilliant. So,
I won't vote.
No, so I'll wait for a few moments and get the feedback in. But it'd be really good to hear about how we may be able to help you with moving forward with any of these areas. Okay, I'll leave it a few more moments. Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you ever so much, everybody, for that feedback. That's really helpful. And Dom, just so you know, what we have is a very large percentage of interest in mental health and other health and safety training. So what we would like to do then is make contact. Dom, if I can ask that you make contact and follow up with those who've shown an interest in the mental health and health and safety training. We'll obviously follow up with everything else there. So that's really helpful. Thank you very much, everybody. And so before we close, we just want to let you know of some upcoming webinars. So we have the SME Challenge, Marketing to Secure New Business, coming up tomorrow. Not next week, but tomorrow. And then next week, or the week after, I'm getting my weeks mixed up here, we have the absence management webinar. So I'm going to be running that, and it'll be looking at how to deal with mental health absences. So Dom ran one a few weeks ago. That was more aimed at the health and safety avenue. The one I'll be running will be looking at it actually, how do you manage it in the workplace and the whole absence management piece. We then have another SME Challenge webinar that's around how to manage cybersecurity. So that's coming up on the 18th of March. And we have another health and safety webinar again in March that's general fire safety. And again, I'll be running one in April, all to do with data and GDPR compliance and implications after Brexit. So we have those on our website advertised if you would like to join us for those. And then we are working in the background looking to set up the next programme from April onwards, so watch this space. So just want to let you know of a few things that we can do to help support you. So in terms of supporting staff, you know, I've talked about mental health first aiders a moment ago and answering one of the questions. And for those of you that know, then obviously this is one of the areas of training that Dom can provide. So we have the mental health first aiders qualification, providing learners with knowledge of the most common mental health conditions. And I believe you get a certification at the end of it. Is that right, Dom?
Yes, all the training that I do is all nationally recognised, so it's a
Brilliant.
awarding body trained, so you get a certificate that lasts 3 years. Yep.
Perfect. And then I've also mentioned employee assistance programs. So we are linked with associated with organisations that can help with offering an employee assistance programs, you know, and they are really beneficial, you know, giving employees the support they need to help manage their health and well-being effectively. So we can put you in touch with that. So here are the details on the slides. So obviously you will get a copy of the slides after today's webinar. And for those of you that don't know, we do a monthly newsletter. So if you'd like to stay in the loop and keep up to date with health and safety and HR matters, then please do link up and register for our newsletter. And of course, if you do have any further questions after today's webinar, then please feel free to direct these at the contact details on this slide, either by email or telephoning, you know, we'll come back to you as soon as possible. And as always, your feedback really matters to us. It's really important. So after the webinar, we shall be sending out a short survey just to capture your feedback, but we really do appreciate any input that you may have to help us structure our calendar moving forward of, you know, what we offer by way of webinars. And then finally, to thank everybody for joining today. I know everybody's really busy at this moment, so it's really appreciated you've taken time out. And thank you very much, Dom, for talking us through what's actually a very difficult and kind of can be a very scary subject to deal with practically.
Yeah,
so really
pleasure.
appreciate the webinar today, and thank you everybody for joining. So thank you, everybody.